Well, I'd like to welcome everybody coming into this room for an awesome event that we're going to have today. I'd really like to welcome everybody from far and near to teaching pronunciation. It doesn't take a native speaker. I'm Marsha Chan, and I'm one of the coordinators of the Teaching of Pronunciation interest group at CATESOL. My partner is Jadine Elvin, and we also are sponsored by an NLEI, Non-Native Language Educators Issues. And the coordinator is Vanessa Quesada. You can find us on CATESOL. And of course, you can find both of our groups on Facebook. So we're really glad to have you. This is our team for the teaching of pronunciation. Randy Reitmeyer is here as our assistant coordinator, and Jadine Elvin is our co-coordinator for not only this year, but also last year. I see that among us today, we have not only CATESOL members, but many who are non-members. So we'd like to welcome you and let you know about some CATESOL member benefits. We'd love you to join us because you will be able to be a member of our really vibrant community of CATESOL. You'll be able to get the CATESOL Journal, monthly updates, discounts to conferences, both regional and state. And you know, an event like this would be free instead of having to pay $5. You'll have free access to an unlimited number of interest groups, levels, and chapters. You'll have the chance to interact with everyone and network, learn and teach with other members of CATESOL, have online discussions with like-minded professionals on our message boards. If you're looking for a job, you'll have access to our job bank. We have a lot of teaching resources, and there are opportunities for awards and grants for teachers. So we hope that you will become a member of CATESOL if you are not already one. Now, I'd like to introduce Donna Brinton.
Hi,
you know
everybody.
Donna probably really well from her name and probably some of you under her leadership. She is an international TESOL instructor and educational consultant in second language education. And she previously worked at UCLA, where some of you may have come from. She was in the world languages and cultures as a lecturer, as academic coordinator, and associate director. And she taught at University of Southern California and Silka University of America. And now she does a lot of work on her own as a private educational consultant. And you know that teachers in, I don't know, I lost count, maybe around 50 countries around the world have benefited from her training, her wealth of knowledge, and excellent modeling. Donna is the recipient of the English Language Program's 30 at 30 award by the U.S. Department of State. Donna Brinton has co-authored many English language textbooks and professional texts that we all know and love, including Teaching English as a Second or Foreign Language, Content-Based Instruction, What Every ESL Teacher Needs to Know, and many, many other titles. She has devoted many years to our organization, CATESOL, not the least of which is co-editing the CATESOL Journal for 12 years in the past, and co-editing a recent issue of the journal on evidence-based pronunciation teaching, which she will talk about later today, giving plenary speeches at state and regional conferences. I've had the privilege of working with Donna on several projects, including the inaugural colloquium in 2013 for TOP, Teaching of Pronunciation Interest Group, which we gave with our colleague Judy Gilbert, as well as on several presentations and papers involving teaching of pronunciation and content-based instruction. Now, I give you Donna Brinton.
And by the way, I told Marsha to keep the introduction low key. I don't think she succeeded at that, but thank you, Marsha. I do appreciate the introduction. Okay, so.
Oh, right. And by the way, she has provided us with a handout of her presentation today. So is anybody interested in seeing that? Look in the chat.
Yeah.
I hope that you will find a file. And if you don't, I will have to send it again. I'm not sure if you can see a file that I sent before you entered the room. Maybe you can let me know. Is it in the, if you click on file in your chat, do you get to download that? You can nod or put the thumbs up, or you can even say, yes, I got it in the chat, so we'll know. So when you click file, you don't see it. Well, then I'm going to send it again. And then we'll let Donna start her presentation. Let's see, where would I have put it? That's the next thing. All right, I'll tell you what. Donna, you go ahead.
I'm going to go ahead.
Just switch around. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Welcome everybody to our presentation, and I love the fact that we have two CATISOL interest groups co-sponsoring this. I happen to be a member of both of them, so the Teachers of Pronunciation and also the Non-Native Language Educator Issues interest groups. So thank you both for co-sponsoring this. It's a topic that I suggested to Marsha, and she jumped on it and said, let's do that. So you're the first people to ever see this presentation. It's a topic that I've been thinking about for a long time, because whenever I present, I have people come up to me afterwards and say, well, I'd love to teach pronunciation, but I'm not a native speaker and I'm hesitant to do it. This presentation is all about why you should not be hesitant. So hopefully I'll have convinced some of you by the end of the presentation that you too can teach pronunciation, and I'll give you some tips for how you can do that more effectively. All right, a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. So I'm going to start by examining just 3 myths about teaching pronunciation. Some of you may be familiar with Linda Grant's wonderful book, Pronunciation Myths, from the University of Michigan Press. And these are myths that appear in her volume and that also get busted. So I'm going to try to bust these myths a little bit. I want to bring in research, and I want to talk about what the research tells us about non-native language educators who are teaching pronunciation. And there's quite a bit of research. I'm not going to be real heavy on the research in this presentation, but I think it's important for us to look and see what it is the research tells us. Then I want to transition over to something that I think is really important, and that is the non-native English speaking teachers' advantage in teaching pronunciation, which some of you may not have thought about, but I want to convince you that in fact you have an advantage. What's required to teach pronunciation effectively? And this is actually aimed at both our non-native English speaking teachers and our native English speaking teachers. I've been doing some work with colleagues from Australia on what we mean when we say effective pronunciation instruction, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to wind down with a couple of useful resources that I really like, that I want to share with you, some wise advice from others that I also want to share with you, and then hopefully we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. Before I begin, just a little bit of a disclaimer. There are lots of terms floating around to talk about native speakers, non-native speakers, native language educators, non-native language educators, multilingual learners, multilingual educators, and I'm very aware that some of these are preferred terminologies. I am actually going to be using the terms native and non-native, and so nest and N-N-E-S-T, nest, not that we have a geminate consonant at the beginning of a word in English, but here it is. I'm basing this basically on this wonderful article from 2005 from Golombek and Jordan, who say, we recognize that the terms native speaker and non-native speaker are highly inaccurate and contested terms. However, we choose to use them to highlight the unequal power relations that exist in usage. So those of you who prefer other terms, please understand I'm using these partially because it's just easier in the presentation, but also in the pronunciation literature, these are the terms that predominate. All right, so let's look at the three myths that I wanted to examine. The first myth, the goal of second language pronunciation instruction is native-like pronunciation. Second myth, students need a native speaker model to emulate. And third myth, native speakers are the best pronunciation teachers. And I'm sure you've all heard all three of these myths before, and you probably also understand that these aren't accurate, but I wanted to sort of take this opportunity to look at them and uncover what the specialists say about them. So myth number one, again, the goal of second language pronunciation instruction is native-like pronunciation. Today, we talk about the goal of second language pronunciation instruction being intelligibility. And I particularly like the term from John Levis in his 2005 article, where he talks about comfortable intelligibility. So not just that you're intelligible, but that it doesn't take effort on the part of your listener to understand what it is you're saying. So that's what we want our students to be. And obviously that's what we also want any teacher of pronunciation to be, comfortably intelligible. Second, students need a native speaker model to emulate. Not necessarily. What they need is a highly intelligible model to emulate. And it's not at all necessary that that person be a native speaker. And then third, native speakers are the best pronunciation teachers. Actually, the best pronunciation teachers are those who have appropriate training, dedication, and are inspirational models for their students. And I'm going to be talking more about this as we sort of move through the material that I want to present. Unfortunately, and we all know this, there are many non-native English speaking teachers who feel reluctant to teach pronunciation because they believe their own pronunciation is not good enough. Whether or not these feelings are warranted, there are these feelings of inadequacy. And the research documents this. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the research studies that show this, but also I just know this as a presenter. Whenever I present about pronunciation, I have people coming up from the audience afterwards saying either, you know, what could I do as a non-native English speaking teacher? I want to improve, but I'm reluctant to teach pronunciation. So that's what got me thinking about wanting to do this presentation. Okay, here's the reality. These are the most recent statistics that I was able to find. I don't know how accurate they are, but whether or not they're totally accurate, I think this is pretty impressive. The number of non-native English speaking teachers globally is estimated at 12 million, and that is 80% of all English language teachers worldwide. So obviously, if all 12 million of those teachers are reluctant to teach pronunciation, and they constitute 80% of all the English language teachers worldwide, who's going to shoulder the responsibility if the non-native English speaking teachers don't? Okay, a little bit of a summary about the research findings. And there's actually a much larger research base about this than I had realized when I started preparing this talk. I took a look at what was out there, and there's quite a bit of research there. Some of that is in my bibliography that's in the handout. So I hope by now everybody's been able to access the handout. All right, so non-native English-speaking teachers' beliefs. This is a whole sort of realm of the literature that's quite interesting. I'm just going to be reporting the findings from the major article, which is by Yuan 2019. And this confirms what we've already been talking about. So overall, non-native English-speaking teachers rate the importance of pronunciation teaching highly. In other words, they hold pronunciation teaching to be extremely important. But as we've mentioned, many of them are influenced by this pervasive ideology of what we can call native speakerness. That's the term that the researchers use in their article. And they believe that the goal of pronunciation instruction is the native speaker model. So believing this obviously reinforces their feelings of inadequacy. And in short, these non-native English speaking teachers don't always see themselves as legitimate teachers of pronunciation. And then in the EFL context, the strong influence of societal views regarding proper pronunciation is something that also influences these teachers negatively. The researchers, Bai and Yuan, actually did their research in Hong Kong, and there was a very strong feeling that British English, proper British English pronunciation should be the goal of the classroom teaching. And this then influenced a lot of the teachers who didn't feel that they had a proper British accent and dissuaded some of them from teaching pronunciation. Okay, we get a kind of mixed picture. This is a summary of John Levis's article in 2016, and also the research that I've been doing with my colleagues in Australia, Mike Burry and Amanda Baker. So the research documents the following things. One, there is a clear learner preference for native English-speaking teachers due to the perception that they provide a better pronunciation model. And notice that I've sort of italicized perception here. It's not necessarily the reality, but it is a perception. And so this is maybe the sort of bad news. I'll come to some better news in a minute, but this is documented by most of the research studies that have looked at what learners believe. So obviously then, as a result of this, teachers whose first language is not English may lack confidence in their own pronunciation, and they may be hesitant to model pronunciation targets, which we might call controlled practice, let alone venture into guided or free practice. And the pronunciation pedagogical literature talks about this need to move from controlled to guided to free practice. So if you're not even doing controlled practice, there's not much pronunciation teaching that's going on in the classroom at all. And then the same is true for teachers with limited pedagogical content knowledge. I know this from some of the international work that I've done with teachers, where I've been asked as an English language specialist for State Department to do whole short courses with teachers on pronunciation pedagogy for second language learners. And those teachers will tell me, as part of our teacher preparation, we took a course in phonetics, but we never took a course in what to do with that in the classroom with our learners. In other words, we didn't have any sort of methodological guidance on how to teach pronunciation. And then the results indicate that effective pronunciation instruction is more dependent on knowledgeable teaching practices than on native or non-native speaker status of the teacher. And that's, I think, the good news. So if we look back to the sort of bad news in our first bullet point, that's definitely countered by the fact that effective pronunciation instruction, as it's been measured by those who are doing classroom research, shows that it really doesn't make a difference whether you're a native or a non-native speaker teacher. What does make a difference is that you have had training in how to be an effective pronunciation instructor. And that's what the top group is all about. So you're in the right place. All right. In 2014, John Murphy wrote an article that was very, very influential about the need for teacher education in the area of pronunciation instruction. So this is just a little bit of a summary of what Murphy found in his 2014 article. So what he found was that a minority, actually a kind of scary minority of teacher education programs offered comprehensive training in pronunciation pedagogy. And those courses that did exist in his study often focused on the phonological system rather than on any pedagogical aspects of how to teach pronunciation. So it taught, these courses taught people the what of pronunciation, but not the how. And research suggests that a how to teach approach would be both more accessible and have a greater impact on teachers' classroom practices. So the need for pronunciation pedagogy. Surveys of practicing teachers then also in Murphy's study documented the need for more thorough pronunciation training and more in-service training opportunities. And in-service is, of course, what we're doing right now. And overall, empirical evidence suggests that non-native English-speaking teachers, like their native English-speaking teacher colleagues, are in a strong position to teach pronunciation in the classroom as long as they are trained adequately. And maybe just a sidelight here. When my colleagues, Marianne Salsmercia, Janet Goodwin, and I were writing the first edition of our Cambridge University Press text teaching pronunciation, we told the publishers we want to have a two-in-one approach. We want to teach the sound system of the English language, and we want this book to also be a how to teach this sound system in the classroom. And the initial reaction of the publisher was that that isn't going to be possible to do in one volume. Well, I think that we did it successfully, and there are a lot of other texts out on the market today that do that successfully as well. But that was kind of a groundbreaking idea, and I'd credit my colleague Janet Goodwin for the sort of brilliant template that she came up with for that text, because originally we thought the first half of the book would be what English pronunciation is all about, and the second half would be how to do it. And she said that's not going to be a good idea. What we need to do is intermix these two, and she came up with this great template that we use in the textbook. All right. I said I was going to talk about why non-native English-speaking teachers might be at an advantage over native English-speaking teachers for teaching pronunciation. So here again, some ideas and also backed up by research. So some of the advantages of the nests over nests vis-a-vis the teaching of pronunciation. First, a non-native English-speaking teacher tends to have firsthand experience with English pronunciation, with acquiring English pronunciation, and therefore understands the process of acquiring a new sound system from the learner's perspective. And that's something that the native English-speaking teacher may not have. The nest also has insights into the first language of their students that native speakers often do not have. And I know from having taught pronunciation practically all my life, I have insights into certain L1s of certain of my students, but then if I'm teaching a multilingual class, there'll be students from 5 or 6 language groups that I've never taught before, and I have no idea what I can expect in terms of the pronunciation challenges that they're going to be facing. The non-native English-speaking teacher can share stories from their own experience and can empathize with student frustrations. And then finally, and I think this one is actually also very important, they may offer up a more attainable model for their students to ascribe to, since they're not, they don't have a complete native-like pronunciation, but they are those teachers who have achieved that comfortable intelligibility that we were talking about, and who are inspirational models for their students to look up to. Some more advantages. They've overcome the hurdles that their students encounter, and they can effectively coach their students using the techniques that were successful for them. And then finally, local teachers possess an in-depth understanding of the culture and are thus often able to navigate the context-specific challenges more effective than teachers from the outside. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about this, this need for teacher empathy, which is something that I've been working on with Mike Burry and Amanda Baker. All right, so what's required to be an effective teacher of pronunciation now that we know that you don't need to be a native speaker, but what is it that you do need to have in terms of the toolkit that you use in the classroom? So a little bit of a checklist. To be an effective teacher of pronunciation, you have to have the following things. One, you need to be trained in the sound system of English and in second language pronunciation pedagogy. So that sort of 2-for-1 approach that I was talking about. You need to be an appropriate and inspirational role model for your students, not necessarily a native speaker, but an inspirational role model. You need to be empathetic and supportive of your students because there's a lot of sort of ego permeability issues that go on in the pronunciation classroom. And that's something that I think the teacher of pronunciation needs to understand, that close link between ego issues and pronunciation issues. And then you finally need to be active, strategic, and resourceful. So I'll talk about all of these in a minute. This is from Teaching Pronunciation, the text that I did with Marianne Selsmercia and Janet Goodwin, my colleagues, my lovely colleagues from UCLA, who I miss a lot. So what the teacher needs to know, this is the teacher's knowledge base as we sketched it out. And we felt that it fell into 3 main areas. Area number 1 being knowledge of the pronunciation feature. So the sound system of English, things like articulation rules, occurrences in discourse. Second area, awareness of potential student problems. The example here is the student's first language and potential challenges that might stem from their first language not having certain sounds or certain features that exist in English, although there are other things as well that would fall into this area. And then the third area, pedagogical priorities. So if I'm putting together a syllabus for my class, which features do I teach? When do I teach them? What comes first? And how does the teaching context influence the pedagogical priorities that I'm going to put together in my syllabus? I really like from Leah Kemi Stein's book, the Continuum that Pasternak and Bailey put together about being an effective teacher. So they divide this continuum into 4 quadrants. And in quadrants 1 and 2, what you have is a teacher who is proficient in the target language. In quadrants 3 and 4, the teacher that we don't want in the classroom who is not proficient in the target language. And then on the other axis, what we have is teachers who are professionally prepared as teachers and those who are not professionally prepared as teachers. And we all know that both of these teacher groups exist. And what we're aiming for is a teacher, obviously, who's going to fall into quadrant number 1. So as an efficient and effective teacher of pronunciation, you want to be proficient in the target language, but you also want to be professionally prepared as a teacher. I said I would talk a little bit about this idea of empathetic and supportive. And this is from the work that I've been doing with my Australian colleagues, especially Amanda Baker. This is her area of expertise. She says, pronunciation also has strong emotional ties to an L-true learner's sense of identity and belonging to a particular community, thus calling for a more holistic and learner-sensitive model of effective pronunciation teaching. So she's putting together a model that includes this whole idea of the need for an empathetic and supportive teacher, particularly in the pronunciation classroom, more so perhaps than in other skill areas. Active, strategic, and resourceful, again from the work that I've been doing lately. Finally, personal professional factors can have a major impact on teacher practices, in that teachers who are enthusiastic about pronunciation teaching and developing their students' ability to communicate effectively in oral communication are more likely to explore a wider variety of pronunciation techniques and implement them into practice in the classroom. So obviously this is important in all skill areas, not just in pronunciation, but what we want to do is highlight how important that is for the teaching of pronunciation as well. Okay, I'm going to move into this idea of what resources are out there for you as teachers of pronunciation. So first of all, if you're not familiar with Robin Walker and his blog on teaching pronunciation, I strongly suggest that you check it out. I love everything he writes. He's been doing an A to Z of pronunciation teaching. And so he'll say, you know, P is for pronunciation pedagogy, and they're short reads. They might take 10 minutes to read, but they're really, really excellent. So that's one resource I wanted to highlight. Hancock McDonald. So Mark Hancock and Annie McDonald have another blog that I think can also be very, very useful. And then if you haven't already read cover to cover the CATESOL Journal special issue on pronunciation teaching, again, this is an open source journal, which means that anybody anywhere in the world can access this issue, which came out in 2019, I believe. I recommend that you take a look at that as well. There are articles that are more research heavy. There are also articles that are more sort of pedagogically focused. Marsha has a really nice article in there about using body and other issues to teach pronunciation. Yes, there she goes. Okay, if you can see her on the screen. So that is another one. And I co-edited that issue of the journal with John Levis and Anna Wu. This might be a moment, an appropriate moment for us to mention how much in shock some of us are to have just heard about Anna's passing on Sunday. Anna was a member of both the Teachers of Pronunciation Interest Group and the Non-Native Language Educator Issues Interest Group, as well as a member of groups in affiliated groups in TESOL International. She was an inspirational educator, and more than anything, she was a warm, wonderful human being. So if we could just take 1 minute of silence to honor Anna, I'd really appreciate that. And Marsha and I came up with this idea. So let's take just a brief moment to honor Anna and to mourn her passing. Thank you. All right, some more resources that we can look at and depend on. obviously, I don't need to tell you about CATESOL's Teachers of Pronunciation. That's the group that you're currently following. But if you're not a member of CATESOL, obviously, we strongly recommend that you join. I'll say a couple more things about that in a minute. TESOL has its own speech pronunciation listening interests section. Here's some information how you can join them. And finally, IATEFL has its very, very active PronSig. So here's some information for connecting with PronSig, which also has its Speak Out journal, which is available to members, but a webinar series that appears to be open to non-members as well. And they have, which I've listed there, their own YouTube channel. So if you're interested in seeing some webinars, very professional webinars on how to teach pronunciation, these are very practically focused, then I recommend PronSig's YouTube channel. So all three of these organizations are excellent organizations to be a member of if you want to enhance your own skills in the area of teaching pronunciation. And then specifically to teachers of pronunciation, which Marsha has already mentioned, the fact that one of the membership bonuses of being a CATESOL member is not only that you can participate live in webinars like the one you're participating in today, but also that you have access to all of the recorded sessions. So for example, this session that you're participating in right now is being recorded and will be uploaded to the CATESOL site. Not only do you have access to pronunciation sessions, but sessions from all of the other interest groups as well that are conducting very actively lots of webinars like the one that you're participating in. And then of course, the whole plethora of teacher preparation texts that are out there for learning how to teach pronunciation. Some of these very, very affordable, like Ways Goose Press's 50 Ways to Teach Pronunciation, which you can get. It's an ebook on Amazon.com. Mark Hancock just came out with something very similar called 50 Tips for Teaching Pronunciation. That one just came into my mailbox the other day, so I still haven't even had a chance to look at it. So there's more and more material out there for those of you who want to go a little bit more in depth and look at how to teach pronunciation in a nice compact volume. Okay, I promised that I would give you some wise advice and some kind of parting encouragement before we move on to the question and answer session. So starting with, I mentioned already Robin Walker's blog. So this is a quote from his A from Accent blog. Accent has given way to intelligibility as the main focus of pronunciation teaching. And since intelligibility isn't directly related to any particular accent, we can now get to the answer to the question about which accent to use in class when teaching pronunciation. The answer, thankfully, is quite simple. Use whichever accent you wish, provided that the accent you opt for is known to be widely intelligible to other users of English, native speaker and non-native speaker. The accent you choose is acceptable to your students, and you have easy access to that accent for the classroom. I also wanted to mention a little bit from the English as a lingua franca literature, the fact that we live today in an English as a lingua franca world, and that has also had a huge impact on the teaching of pronunciation. So this is from Sifakis 2014. The communicative use of English today is markedly different from 20 years ago. English is still used very widely between native and non-native users, but today it's even more widely used among non-native users. This means that the norms and standards of communication that have permeated the teaching curricula of the past 2 to 3 decades should be supplemented with a tangible awareness of this changing scene. One of the projects that I did several years back that I'm going to be talking about at TESOL this year was a State Department assignment in the Lower Mekong region, which is the 5 countries of Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. And we produced a volume called Professional Communication Skills for Learners that includes a whole pronunciation component for professionals in fields like agriculture and other fields who are communicating with other non-native speakers at professional conferences, need to have that quote unquote comfortable intelligibility in order to communicate about their particular profession. So this was a huge English for professional purposes project that we did that's that's available through the State Department's American English site. It's available for download. So if you're interested in 550 pages of materials about how to teach English for professional purposes, also including how to teach pronunciation to professional purposes, I recommend that. And then from Robin Walker again, in a world where English is a global language, a native speaker accent is no guarantee of being easily understood and may even be an obstacle to successful communication. And Robin also has a wonderful volume on pronunciation in the lingua franca context. So I recommend that. Okay, that concludes my formal presentation, but we have plenty of time for questions. And also I would encourage the moderators to also consider yourselves to be experts on this topic. So if I'm not able to answer a question, please feel free to chime in. And Marsha, I think you're going to moderate the questions, right? And
Well, I
I'm gonna
so
stop.
grateful.
So I'm going to stop my sharing here.
To Donna for giving us this excellent presentation. And I'd like to invite everyone to make comments and ask questions and interact with one another. Don't be shy. I think we could turn our mics on whenever we feel like speaking. So since this is a pronunciation and language educators group, we shouldn't be shy about talking. But if you feel shy about opening your mouth to speak, you may type in the chat as you please.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm a little bit shy here. I'm Flavia.
Hi, Flavia.
Yeah, I just would like to say thank you for your presentation. I just started a class in Linguistic 107 at SJSU. Yeah, and I'm Brazilian.
A good place, SJSU. Yeah. We like it.
Yeah, I'm Brazilian, and I'm living in USA since 2015. And I was a teacher in Brazil as well, but the first time I came to USA, when I heard the native speakers, I felt so shy. I felt like I kind of blocked myself totally. I was afraid to speak for about 1 month. And really, and then I went to a different field. I studied at Las Positas College. I went into the field of early childhood education. I was about to give up on my dream as being an English teacher. Yeah, but now I'm back.
We're happy to hear that.
Yeah, and I'm happy to, because I'm doing this class and Professor Scott, he's so knowledgeable. And when he shared your workshop, I'm happy to be here participating. And I'm very excited for one day be one professor here as well to teach English for non-native speakers. Thank you.
That's a wonderful story, Flavia. Thank you. And you're in good hands with Professor Scott.
Thank you so
I know
much.
him well, I know him well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate.
Sure. Okay, please don't be shy, people. Any questions you have? And Neda?
Yes, Neda. I teach pronunciation at UCI for graduate students, let's say TAs mostly, and also I teach at IVC. So I'd like to know about some resources. I mean, I do that in my classes, but I'd like to learn more about resources that we can teach students to be more intelligible. So especially for international students or TAs, a lot of them go back to their country, so they may not want to, let's say, communicate with native speakers for the rest of their lives. So, but how about like resources that we can use to teach students to be more intelligible or effective users of English as a lingua franca or as an international language?
Okay.
And I'm a non-native speaker myself, so
yeah.
well, I guess.
I mean, there's a huge amount of stuff that's out on the internet. Some of it good, some of it not so good. I would start with some of those volumes that were on the one slide that I put up that that prepare teachers, because some of those will share some great resources with you. But also, you might want to look at that Hancock McDonald site. He does a lot of work on, and a lot of resources that he and Annie McDonald, his partner, post a lot of resources there that you can use in the classroom. So I would maybe start with that one just because we're talking about people who really know what they're doing, who do a really excellent job of providing resources for language teachers. And those materials are highly interactive. That's one of the things that I like about them a lot. So that's a place to start. In terms of other resources, there are so many things that are available out there that you can, but I take a look at that one page where I listed some of the texts that are out there, like the repeat after me, the 50 techniques that you can use to teach pronunciation. Those are really good texts that you can learn from as a teacher and that you can there share with your students.
Great, thank you so much.
And Marsha or anybody else, Randy, if you have any brilliant ideas, feel free to. Marsha, what about Pronunciation Doctor?
What about Pronunciation Doctor? Okay, well, I do have a YouTube channel. So I'm on YouTube as a Pronunciation Doctor, and I have over 2,000 videos that are available free for teachers and learners of English. And they're organized into like 30 different playlists. So you might find something of use to you and your students. I have heard that some teachers they like to co-teach with Marsha, the Pronunciation Doctor, and put something on the screen and then work together over the material or the process, for example, of getting ready for oral work by understanding all the parts that you need to get the sound out from your lungs and articulating the sounds with all these parts of your mouth, and then working on different sounds and intonation patterns. So you might try that. And also, there's a blog that I have called Marsha Prof Dev, which is professional development. I can put those in the chat. So those are a few. Thanks.
Maybe Marla, anything you want to share? Any particular resources? I know Marla's also got a great book out there.
There are a lot, okay, besides Marsha's, which is wonderful. There, of course, there's Jennifer ESL and Rachel's English. Those are really good sets of YouTube videos. Just watch out for the ones that are not so well informed, or because sometimes it seems like everybody who's ever taught a little bit of pronunciation in Korea or Japan thinks that they can put up their videos. So
Yeah, there's some
Avoid
scary
those.
stuff. There's some scary stuff out there that,
Yeah.
yeah, that I would avoid. So yeah, so that's why I'm sort of asking people who are maybe closer to the classroom than I am, because I'm a teacher educator, but I am not in the classroom day to day with students who are learning how to how to pronounce in English. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Randy, anything you want to add?
Well, I teach a lot of international TAs, and I use Rachel's English, as was just mentioned. And another website that's come to my attention is by Baruch College. I can type the link into the chat, and it's got a lot of really accessible pronunciation resources, really well designed.
Okay, great. Okay, other questions?
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Donna. My question is about having, one second, sorry, thank you. My question is about how do you approach teachers, non-native English speaking teachers, to persuade them or to encourage them that they have the skills, they have the advantage in teaching pronunciation? Is there
Is there a magic bullet?
yeah, or is there something that you've used over the years that you found effective in creating buy-in?
Well, that's kind of why I created this session today, because I haven't seen a session exactly like this, and I wanted to, to sort of share my feeling about it. When I mention in passing, this whole issue in some of the other pronunciation sessions that I've done, teachers come up afterwards and they say, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for encouraging me. I think it's just more about encouraging teachers and telling them, and sharing the fact that there is some research on this, and the research is very encouraging. The research shows that it's not your native speaker or non-native speaker status. It's the fact that you are trained to do this. And so all of us with training can excel at teaching pronunciation, but in the absence of that training, the most native speaker model, is not going to be effective. And, one of the things I'm very aware of when I do international training is that there is that whole group of English teaching, like English teaching assistants from Fulbright who come as native speakers, and they serve a very useful purpose, but they tend to intimidate the non-native speaking teachers and into thinking that maybe they should be assigned to teach pronunciation. So very often I've seen this happen with Fulbright ETAs or English language fellows, that they're put into the classroom to teach pronunciation, whereas in fact they have no background in the sound system of English whatsoever. And their non-native speaking teacher counterparts do and should be the people who are there, or at least they should be co-teaching. So, so I think just keeping that message out there. I originally proposed this talk to a group in Cambodia, and I wanted to give it as a plenary for this conference that was taking place in Siem Reap, and they turned it down. I was kind of little disappointed. They turned the topic down because they didn't want to use the word native speaker. And I said, but I'm giving the exact opposite message. I'm not saying you need to be a native speaker. I'm saying you don't need to be a native speaker. I ended up doing a completely different topic for them. And that's when I just mentioned, to Marsha, I said, oh, gee, here's what happened. I don't know why. And she said, well, let's do it for top. So that's how this came about. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a magic solution other than just spread the message, message, encourage people. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Can I suggest one thing that we did at UCI? When in our TEFL program, we had a lot of students who were also saying, I can't teach pronunciation. My pronunciation isn't good enough. So we organized a panel discussion with some of our teachers in our program who were non-native speakers, and Netta was one of them, and thank you, Netta. And ask them questions. You know, what is your experience teaching pronunciation, and how did you do it, and how, you know, what tips can you give? And it was really helpful because hearing it from somebody who has already succeeded in teaching pronunciation is really, really powerful.
That's great, Marla. I love that. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Marla.
Yeah,
Hi.
please. Hi.
Hi. So I'm here with my professor and Josh is one of my classmates, and so is a lot of other people that are here today. So that's kind of fun and exciting that we're learning together. So I was wondering with the formula or concept of active, strategic, and resourceful, do you have some sort of example that you could give us on how you would use that in the class through maybe an activity or a reflection assignment?
I don't really, Carol,
Okay.
because
All right.
this is sort of new and it's coming from my
Sure.
Australian colleague, not from me, but I could certainly ask her if she has some concrete suggestions, and I'd be happy if you want to, I gave you my email. So if
I
you
would
want
love
to
that.
email me, I will email Amanda and say, hey,
excellent.
Amanda, we want some concrete examples of this. What do you
Thank
mean
you.
exactly by this? And I'd be happy to
I'd love that. Thank you so
respond
much.
back to you. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Donna.
So one of the things I was thinking about is that about the training part and the empathy part. Maybe some people will feel that they don't have the training yet. I mean, that's obvious, like you're going into a training course, but some people may feel, well, I don't have the training, so I can't open my mouth yet. Not. One of the things I think it's really, really kind of fundamental is the empathy part. Like if you, I'm sure you know people who are better listeners than others because they not only have their ears open, they have their hearts open. You know, they are willing to listen to what somebody is trying to say rather than saying, that sounds weird, I don't know what you're saying, goodbye, right? So that, I'm just thinking, well, what can you tell a non-native speaker who's a little bit shy about it, is that, you know, having this open heart and open ability to try to understand people is like going so far in reaching at your audience. Because after all, pronunciation is just one aspect of speaking, which is one aspect of communicating. And so if you are trying to communicate, you're trying to exchange ideas and feelings, then having this open channel, probably a lot of the teachers who you're working with have that ability to open up and use that as a pathway to help them while they're getting the training about phonology and pronunciation and intonation and teaching methodology. Just an idea.
Yeah, and that ties in with the advantages that I was mentioning, the fact that, you know, you're coming from a background of having gone through this yourself, so that allows you to be a lot more empathetic. I'm a former teacher of German. Some people may not know that. That my first job was as a teacher of German, and I'm not a native speaker of German, obviously. So I acquired German as an 11-year-old when my father put me and my two sisters in a German high school system because he was on sabbatical in Germany. And I learned very painfully how to pronounce German because my classmates would ridicule me and make me do German tongue twisters. And so I think, you know, I was an empathetic teacher of German simply because I'd gone through that process myself. Somebody, I think, had a question that they were about to ask.
I saw the name Sylvia Ortega. Sylvia, would you like to ask your question now?
It's okay. I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
I have a question. Hi, Donna. I'm
Hi.
Rosanna. I'm also one of the Cal State San Bernardino students here today. There's a big group of us.
Great, great.
And I actually recently did a paper on native speakerism and
Wonderful.
did quite a bit
Ooh.
of reading about it. And I was especially interested in what you said about student perceptions creating an obstacle to how they accept their non-native speaker teacher. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how to combat those perceptions besides, I mean, it's besides just telling students that 80% of teachers are not, you know, like what are your thoughts on combating those perceptions?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a great answer to it. It's not just perceptions of the students themselves, but like in that Bayinyuan study, it's all about the perceptions of the parents. So the parents also influence the children. And I know from a very painful experience in my past as a German teacher, that can be a really powerful influence. When I finished my MA in German, I learned that there was a need for teachers in the German school system, and I went to Germany, and because my qualifications were in German rather than in teaching English, I didn't even know there was such a thing as TESOL at the time. I got put in as a teacher in 8th grade in the German classroom, and the local parent-teacher association raised a huge stink with the school system about having a non-native speaking teacher in the classroom. That was my first year ever of teaching, so it was a horrible year. I'll you know, it I don't know, really colored my life, I think, and made me more empathetic to non-native English speaking teachers and non-native teachers of any language. I think probably the best thing that you can do is to combat that is to simply focus more on the professional development side of it. So be the most prepared teacher that you possibly can be. And that's going to help with the problem, with the perception, because as the students see that you are a highly professional teacher and have lots of great techniques for teaching pronunciation, that whole fact that you're not a native speaker yourself sort of tends to recede into the background. But if anybody else has great ideas, I'd love to hear them. It's a great question, Rosanna.
Thank you. I actually wasn't thinking of myself because I am actually a native English speaker.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
I was thinking more of on the societal level, you know, just kind of in general. I was thinking, I know it's not exactly pertinent to what this particular webinar is about, but I was thinking about in terms of hiring practices and perception on that level.
And that's where, you know, the professional organizations have come in very strongly and helped to influence this, or helped to combat this whole, you know, whole issue and in hiring practices, but it still continues, obviously. It's not as bad as it was in the past. And so I think we've made progress, but more progress needs to be made for sure on the sort of hiring practices level. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you, Donna. That connects to, I think, some of the questions that everybody's answering. And first, I just wanted to mention Steph actually put a link to the CATESOL position statement regarding discrimination against non-native speaking teachers. So I think that's a great reference for some people to look at. And I know that Steph and I frequently have to send that out to people who send us job announcements that say native speaker required. So there's that education that has to happen as well. But my question is for those of us who are here who are teacher trainers like you as well. I know what we can do with our students, but I wonder if you have any advice for us for pushing back on a larger level against say administrators or school systems or these sorts of things that still have this belief that the native speaker is the preferred target.
Yeah, I think, you know, what you're already doing, working within the professional organization, our professional organization, TESOL, TESOL International, IATEFL, and all of the many affiliates, you know, that exist around the world. I think we just have to keep up the work. I don't know that there's any real solution to it other than working from within and influencing organizations, like you said, what you and Steph are doing already, Scott. You know, sounds great that you're sending out these position statements, monitoring what's going on in the internet and sending out statements to those people. But it's kind of like trying to stop people from posting PDFs of professional books. You know, it's kind of a losing battle in some senses. I'm part of a lot of Facebook groups. I think Facebook groups can be powerful as well. And so, you know, I'm not a member of any particular Facebook pages or groups that work on this, but I'm sure there are, and that they're already doing some pretty good work. So all of us have to, you know, sort of combat that on our own level. That it's a very, very important issue. Yeah, Reiko.
Thank you, Donna. My name is Reiko Kataoka. I am a lecturer in San Jose State University. I am in the same department with Scott and Steph, and then I see Flavia, David,
Got a lot of
Steve.
SJSU people here.
People,
okay, yeah.
I am a phonetician. I work on a speech perception. So on a very important issue, combating against a negative perception to the non-native accented English. One thing we, the speaker of non-native accented English, can contribute to the all learning communities. The speech perception study showed that the more the listener are exposed to non-native accented English, the more fluent listeners those listeners will become, so that they will become easier to listen and comprehend non-native accented English. So in this time for the like a job opportunity, or like many job opportunities will be opened up, and then in those professional fields, many people have to interact with non-native speakers if they want
Absolutely.
to engage in an international project or even national project, unless people are determined to stay in a local community. No, probably that's not a goal for many learners, right? So we speak of non-native accented English are serving the great purpose for making everyone to be fluent listeners.
Yes, and as we've learned from this recent lockdown experience that we're all having, even if we stay in our own communities, inside our own living rooms, we're still interacting with the wider world. And that's that slide that I had that, you know, said it's an elf world. I see that in every aspect of what I'm doing. I just did a webinar with Ritsumeikan University in Osaka with business professors, and we did 5 hours of because they are being asked to transition to English medium instruction, and they all felt, not being native speakers of English and being business and management professionals, that they needed to figure out how they could become more intelligible in speaking English. It's a huge, huge issue. So I appreciate that idea that we need to become more fluent listeners. That's a really important sort of additional component to this whole thing that I didn't mention in my presentation and probably should have.
Could I make a comment on just what Reiko also said?
Yeah, sure.
That helped me immensely in thinking about my teaching. I'm in SFSU's MA TESOL program. I'm sorry. And that helped me frame it so much better. The intelligibility and comprehensibility, it is not all on the speaker.
Right.
Also on the listener. It's a communicative, it's this beautiful balance. So I think if we lift the burden a little bit from our students from the pronunciation speaking, that will ease them a little bit. And also teach our learners and our students to be more fluent listeners.
And more flexible listeners.
Yes, yeah. And expose them. Yeah, that really changed my mind about teaching pronunciation. Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's a great comment.
If I may comment, I don't really have a question, but thank you so much for the webinar. As always, it's very helpful, Ms. Brinton. But I'm a teacher of English, but I'm also a non-native speaker, and I've been teaching pronunciation. And recently I did a symposium, I presented at a symposium in Cal State Fullerton, and my topic was exactly this: non-native speaking teachers versus native speakers. And the research that I conducted, most of it just presents how important of an influence the administrative staff of the school has versus the students. Students' perception of who is the teacher is how the class is run. So if you're a good teacher, they don't really care if you're not a native speaker or non-native speaker.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, they just take what you give and what they learn. That's what's important for them versus the job advertisements, the way the marketing is done. It's so important that we as teachers present ourselves as valuable members of the teaching community versus feel like the way I have felt for many years when I moved to the States, that you are less of an important teacher because you have some sort of accent. And it's just important that we make sure that the school administration presents us as non-native speaking teachers as important members of their staff versus trying to give all the pronunciation classes to
native speakers. Yeah,
because most of the time, like you mentioned earlier too, the native speakers are very good teachers, but they haven't gone through learning the phonetics as we have as non-native speakers. So it's just important that we feel that we're good teachers too. It's okay that we have accent, but at the end of the day, in the classroom, if we can teach our students to differentiate the sounds and make the sounds and be intelligible, that's it. It's great. So thank you.
Yeah, and maybe I could just say that the CATISOL Spring Conference abstract submission process is open right now. So maybe you want to share that research that you did at CATISOL. I think, again, that's, part of what we can do is make presentations of that kind to our own professional organizations. And if we can as well, broadcast that even further through social media, through, websites. So yeah, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
But think about doing that. I'm sure people would love it.
David?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Donna. This is such a wonderful forum. I'm also coming from San Jose State and really appreciate this dialogue, although none of us know where we are right now anyway. We're all over the place.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about the resistance, just to get back to the question of the term native speaker and our mixed sort of sense and mixed comfort using these terms, native and non-native. We use them even sort of with asterisks or in scare quotes a lot of the time. And I'm just thinking about where we are, and globally and as a nation, thinking about the questions, the racial politics that exist in our society now. And the experience like I have of, I worked in Korea for a while, and I, being a white male, was, maybe opened some doors and offered some jobs that friends of mine who were equally native speakers, but who didn't look like me, who were ethnic Korean, in fact, and who were far more capable of navigating Korean society, were offered far lower, salaries or less housing or travel benefits and that kind of a thing. And the discrimination was real. So I'm thinking about people like, Jonathan Rosa and Nelson Flores, who are talking about ratio linguistics and wondering how much, we need to engage as we talk about NNEST issues explicitly with questions of race. and how, you know, and who's doing that? Where are those conversations happening? Or how do we, you know, get more involved in those kinds of conversations to tie these communities together?
Yeah, I'm not my area of expertise in any way, but certainly really, really important issues. So, and they do connect to the teaching of pronunciation, but they're much more global. Yeah. So, and I experience a lot of that as well. I mean, obviously, as I move around the world in different places. So, yeah, thanks for bringing that up, David.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
Oh, good evening. Good
Hi, Vanessa.
afternoon. I would like to make a comment concerning one of the quotes that you included in one of your slides about how the non-native speaker teacher could be a more attainable role model.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to just give you all my perspective. If a student of mine wants to have native-like pronunciation, I respect that. But I like to tell my students, you don't have to. Your accent is part of your identity, is part of who you are, and you do not have to change that. And that's just my position. But I do respect students who want to have native-like pronunciation. I do respect that. They have reasons for that, and it's important for their personal goals and professional goals. And I see that can be considered a benefit. But definitely, I'm always telling them your pronunciation, as long as it's understandable, that's great. You don't have to change your pronunciation. You don't have to change who you are, because there's definitely a very close relationship between pronunciation and identity.
Absolutely, Vanessa. And that, you know, that's why I wanted to mention that. I think it's part of the empathy issue as well. So when you're telling your students you don't need to do this, here's, you know, that you're being empathetic to them, you're opening up to them as a human being, you're letting them know what your personal experience has been and why, you know, what your own personal goals have been. I think that's a really important part of it as well. And I think we need to also maybe focus with the students on what's attainable and what's not attainable. You know, the fact that 99.9% of our students will never be able to attain a native-like accent, you know, we need to give them more realistic perspective on that. So, you know, this whole idea of the intelligibility, that being the goal, I think we need to be very upfront with our students about that as well. Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I really want to thank everyone for your participation. It's really wonderful to have this opportunity to not only hear from Donna Brinton on this issue, but also from all of you teachers, all of us who we teach our students, and our students come from all different backgrounds, and some of us have had experience not only teaching English, but other languages, whether we were native speakers of this language or not, and have run into different kinds of issues on this, either ourselves or, as mentioned before, seen our colleagues undergo some discrimination because of being labeled as non-native and then somehow knocked down in level. So all of us helping together to raise the level of consciousness of everyone. And just like in pronunciation, where listening is half of the conversation, right? I mean, like, we are teachers of pronunciation, but it's hard for us to be teachers of listening on the other side. I wish that, you know, like I just turn a little bit of dial on the listener side, that be a little more empathetic, try a little harder, but we can't do that in our classes, where we can sort of like bring out the idea that communication does involve 2 or more people, for us to sort of implement these ideas in any way we can, with any audience we can, is really important. And a lot of you are in your university studies, so it's really obvious that you are you're dedicated to the teaching of English, as the teaching of oral communication, and also promulgating a better way of communicating. So for that, I want to thank all of you, as well as our speaker. I want to give you an opportunity for something that's free for those of you who are in the field of teaching. The AM English Online, which has pronunciation, writing, listening, and vocabulary, is being offered for free during this pandemic time through September. And if you are interested in learning more about that, you can send email to info@sunburstmedia.com with your subject as AM English. And I'll put that out later in the chat. But I also want to remind you of, or inform you of, some upcoming events with the Teaching of Pronunciation or Top Interest Group. Next month, we're going to have a talk from Ellen Lang, and she'll be talking about implementing a new intonation. And in April, we'll hear from John Levis, who will bring us a fresh perspective on research and teaching pronunciation. So be sure to put those on your calendar. With the NNLEI group, we have a meet and greet that Vanessa, who's here, and her assistant coordinator, Virginia, will do on Wednesday, March 3rd in the afternoon, 3 p.m. Pacific time. And also in April 14th at 2 p.m. And I'm wrong, it's not PST, because by that time we will be on PDT, which is Daylight Savings Time. And they will be leading a session on inspiring and motivating students. So those of you who are interested in top and NNLEI issues, please keep those in mind. But if you don't remember off the top of your head, no worries. I'd like to remind you of all the wonderful benefits that we have as members of CATISO. And on our at our CATISO site, you will see these events showing up on the right side under upcoming events. We have a rotating carousel, which also tells you that we're looking for submissions to our special theme issues on anti-racist perspectives and on pandemic pedagogy for the CATISO Journal. We have several other things coming up. Especially, I want to point out that we have our virtual conference, our spring virtual conference, coming up May 7th and 8th. And if you click on this link here, you will go to our conference website, which tells you more about the event that we'll be holding. Now, Donna mentioned that we are looking for proposals. These proposals for this spring conference are open to members of CATISO as presenters. So here is one more reason for you to join CATISO if you are not already a member, so that you can share your knowledge, your skills, your information with us. And we will have some 30 presentations that will be organized by chapters, by interest groups, and by level. So that's what we're going to do. Some of you who have been in CATISO for some time know that in the past, before the pandemic, we had live get-together, real face-to-face kinds of chapter events, regional events. We had Northern Regional, we had LA Regional, San Diego Regional, Central Regional. And now that we are in our situation where everything is online, we're going to have our second spring conference. Our first one was last spring. So these are some resources that I'd like you to be aware of at CATISO, in addition to all the other kinds of resources that we have here. So once again, I want to thank you so much, once for our presenter, and also for all of you as being really active participants.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for being here today.